Welcome to episode 1 of the Fool Me Twice podcast with Ashley and Sean. I am your host today, Ashley, and with me is my co host, Sean. And how are you doing today, Sean?
I'm doing good this evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. So, this is something that we have been talking about for quite some time. We've been planning to do this show. So, I was hoping that we could do an introductory episode today, let people know where we're coming from, how our show came about, and what we plan on discussing. Um, so, I wanted to throw it over to you and just have you tell people how this show ended up coming about.
Well, we met a year and a half, 2 years ago in autonomy in the same season, and you were the first person I reached out to because you had mentioned you were a massage therapist, and my wife at the time was 8 months pregnant, and she was at the point of get this thing out of me. I'm done. I need help. So I reached out to you for help, and we hit it off, and we've been chatting here and there ever since. But it's been sometimes some really intense conversations and some really taboo subjects, and I love that kind of stuff. And it seemed like you were reading and researching along lines that really interested me, and I think it was vice versa as well.
Yeah, it definitely has been. We've talked about this quite a bit in our conversations that you have introduced me to a lot of subjects and authors and rabbit holes that I really wasn't familiar with. So it has been really educational and definitely broadened my horizons as well as increased the size of my book collection, which has happened to you as well. And it's been really good, but like you were saying earlier, we decided that we have these really good conversations about really interesting subjects, and we want to start shedding the light on some of the things that we're reading, as well as hear from other people who are interested in these subjects as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you get some audience feedback or more ideas? Because 90% of the information I get in the books I read are like comments section of other podcasts, or it's just spoken in passing at my job, or I hear it on the street. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm going to look that up. Or I hear about it in a movie and I say, oh, that's good. So audience audience feedback would be fantastic because it's only going to help us see through the darkness even more, figure out that hidden history or the hidden present, which is really what this is all about.
100%. And I think that's a lot of in our conversations that we're trying to connect the dots. I mean, we certainly have a lot of speculation involved in our conversations. It's sort of a free for all for making connections, exploring ideas, and hopefully adding in some humor along the way. So, why don't we talk about the inspiration for the name of our podcast?
Only once, but twice.
Thank you, George W. It comes from George W., also known as Bush the Stupid. And I mean, we rip on Biden and Obama and Trump for all their gaffes, but really the OG gaff machine was Bush. He was one of a kind, so good. Something about that presidency, because his governorship speeches, he seemed fairly intelligent. And then when he went to the White House, he just lost it. He just lost it. And that was the first thing that popped into my mind, or one of the first things when we were thinking about titles for a show. The name of a show was Fool Me Twice. It comes from George W. Why not?
It's perfect. It is it I knew whenever you said it, because just for people who may not know, that I was talking to Sean about podcast names and he probably sent me 87, and this was one of the gems in there, and then as soon as I heard it, I knew that this was the name. This was what we had to go with. And it is interesting that you talk about him being the gaff machine. Do you think that any part of that was done in order to, like, that it was done intentionally, speculation only, but was that done in order to make him look like he was not mentally capable of being the president. And we have seen that theme continue. So we did have an amazing orator in Obama. Everybody agrees on that. It was extremely well spoken. The cadence, the tone, everything, he was excellent. But then after we had Biden, Trump, and my speculation has been that that's part of a continued humiliation ritual of the United States.
Yeah, it could be. It kind of it puts the blame off of him a little bit. So maybe he was purposely acting stupid, or maybe he just really didn't really care. Honestly, it's a great question, but I don't know the answer. That's good though, because it is kind of a humiliation ritual. Oh, you voted for this person, you voted for that person. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like they constantly do this. This is no secret. They do this back and forth, left and right, up and down, popular, unpopular, Republican now, Democrat next, Republican after that, Democrat after next. And I think that's all done in purpose to prevent any stability amongst the population. And it's kind of a culture of confusion that it's created.
For sure. And we can talk a lot more about that and who we think they is. And this is all the kind of stuff that we enjoy speculating about, but I did want to have a little aside there to talk about W. And the last part of my speculation on this in regards to him is that it also did kind of humanize him to people that liked him. It made him seem very unassuming. It made him seem like truly the good old boy that just like loves Texas baseball and just a regular guy. I think that was maybe
so regular skull and bones, just one of us skull and bones,
a regular old skull and bones guy. Yeah. So I do think perhaps that could have been part of it as well. But anyway, we will definitely explore more of that through our show. There's a lot to talk about, actually. And then there's the Russ Baker book about the Bush family that has a lot of interesting information that we can get into at some point. But before I do that, so I just wanted to wrap up our intro that basically, like Sean said, we met in autonomy and we have been talking ever since then on a lot of different subjects, and we're going to get into that in our show. So, Sean, you have a well-crafted list of the topics that we kind of wanted to cover. So I want you to go through that for us. And also, if you want to kind of explain our game plan, our approach as far as how we're going to present the information and stuff like that. Take it away.
Sure. Well, we won't be able to cover all of these topics in each and every single individual episode, but they will be recurring segments, we'll say. So I've made a little list here, things we've talked about that have been of interest to us that we would like to share and learn more about. They're all in the realm of the hidden history and the hidden present. Spooks. Who doesn't love a good spook story? I'm not talking ghosts, not yet. We're talking about espionage and spies. We talk about that quite a bit.
Can't get enough of a good spook story.
Absolutely. I absolutely love the spook stories, even the old spook stories, the medieval espionage you'd never really think about, but we've even gone back that deep. Another topic, another segment that seems to be recurring that we will dive into are cults and the occult. Of course, can't have your cults without the occult. Another one is what I'm calling eugenics today. And we've talked about the development of eugenics programs throughout the United States and the rest of the world for hundreds of years. But they do the same thing today, but in different ways. They're really, really smart. Just like you were talking about good old George W. None of these people are stupid. We love to say, oh, these elites, these corporation billionaire CEOs, they're all so stupid. The president's so stupid. Now, they are incredibly smart, very calculating. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how to do it. because they know how to get a reaction out of you. They know how to get your money. They know how to manipulate your feelings and public opinion. So anyway, rambling on, below eugenics today, we've got the gift that keeps on giving, the Vietnam War, the perfect war, the techno war, which is the name of a book we'll be covering soon. But that is definitely future proofs past about the 60s. I think it is a pivotal time that really shaped our modern world today. And there's every year we're learning more about secret hidden things that were going on in the 60s, including with the Vietnam War, that we can't stay away from it because it's a hot topic for both of us.
Yeah, and if I could just interject really quick, Sean, this is absolutely the perfect war is, and we can get into the entire conversation that we had whenever you recommended that book to me. But I agree that it is absolutely cornerstone for what we are seeing today. And as they say, history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. So a lot of these things that we see from Vietnam, and as you said, the 60s in general, being this really important cultural turning point that we we're seeing so much overlap with that cultural unrest today. And of course, we've had many major events that happened between the 60s and now, but there's a lot of overlap or a lot of mirroring that we're currently seeing in today's day and time. And as we were talking about the other day, as far as the Vietnam War, I mean, you could really spend a lifetime learning as much as possible and still not know everything because it's such a complex situation. There's so many stories and different battles and events and memoirs and things like that that you could get into to cover it, as well as all the documented history. And there's so many programs that they had run during Vietnam specifically, and I'm sure that it's still that happens in every conflict, but it's just foundational. I think that I feel better in understanding so much more after having a small amount of understanding for Vietnam. And then I also wanted to say eugenics today, that sounds like a segment on NPR. I like it.
It does.
I think I don't like the subject, but I like the subject title. So well done.
Eugenics today. Yeah, it does sounds like a magazine that would come to like delivered to your mailbox for your boomer parents. Eugenics today. Oh, let's find out what's going on in eugenics today. Oh, isn't this great? They're killing more babies. Oh, they're poisoning the water. How wonderful. Fluoride is bad? No. Give them more. The next topic segment that we've gone over a lot and we've got a lot in the works to present about is propaganda. This is general propaganda, and we do have a big trifecta of propaganda coming soon for the audience, and we'll touch on that later in the episode as a sneak peek for what's coming up soon. Next, we have geopolitics and evil statesmanship. Those evildoers. Thank you, George Bush.
Many such cases.
Absolutely. Of course, there is tricksters and the paranormal. It's part of my background. I can't get away from it. And it's something we like talking about. And I've read billions of books about the paranormal. So we'll definitely be sharing some of that and some new modern research as well. Conspiracies and conspiracy candy. I love this. It's so hard to tell the difference between them sometimes, but that's what makes it fascinating to look into. It could be a typical shooting, or it could be an entire protest movement. That could all be conspiracy candy, or it could be pure conspiracy. Maybe it's meant for you to see as a conspiracy, and it's the line blurs between the two, and I like that. This is Ashley's personal favorite, the Smut Chronicles. Can you explain what the Smut Chronicles are?
I am very happy to explain about that. So we only read Hustler for the articles, bro. That's okay. In all seriousness, I do not read Hustler just to read Hustler. Now, I don't even remember why I went down this rabbit hole, but I ended up going to archive.org. Something must have inspired me. It was probably one of our conversations, or perhaps
Yeah, I think we were talking about Larry Flint, right? I think
maybe.
it was a Larry Flint conversation, and then that brought us into the back articles and their
Yes.
magazine, and
Yes.
why
Okay.
he was silenced and taken out, because he was given a lot of freedom to his journalists. So go on.
Wow. Yes. When you start looking into some of the old stuff that Larry Flint was pursuing, or that he hosted with his magazine empire, it's really mind-blowing. And we've already talked about a couple of articles that we want to cover for this show. But anyway, I remember now I saw something on the podcast Control Alt History. And we had talked about, maybe you had mentioned this to me before, but it was the famous supermodel that ended up being a mistress of somebody. What is her name? Do you remember?
I can't.
Is it Karen? It wasn't Karen Silkwood, was it?
I know I have it in the book in my hand right now, but I don't want to take the
Vicky?
time to go through it.
Okay, no worries. Anyway,
I think it was one of Reagan's advisors, and is that who you're talking about?
yes.
And he was the Bloomingdale. It was Bloomingdale,
Yes.
right? Yes,
Yes.
it was Air Bloomingdale's mistress that started speaking a lot of truth before she was
Yes.
taken out.
Yes. Okay. So you had mentioned that to me, and then I ended up watching a couple of videos from Control Alt History, and he did a little bit of a deep dive on that. And Larry Flint did come up because Larry Flint was talking about this even back then. So one of the things that we have learned about Larry Flint is that he was obviously a very controversial figure. Everyone knows that. But what I didn't know is that he seemed really focused on exposing government corruption. And this is a topic that we have seen come up quite a bit in the books that we're looking at, as far as like these authors wrote this book at this time. They were exposing government corruption. They were left leaning. And would that be written today? We don't know. But anyway, at this time, Larry Flint was exposing a lot of these connections. And I mean, he was talking about covert ops and the Reagan administration, so much stuff. So, anyway, that's how I came to look into Hustler magazine. And I was also looking for just some general CIA Green Beret information. And then I discovered that Larry Flint had produced another magazine that is not well known. It's known as The Rebel Magazine, and it was in production at the end of 1983 to 1984. And there was only 8 episodes, or 8 magazines released from this particular magazine, and they go hard in the paint. So we're going to be talking about that. But from now on, whenever we're getting information out of one of Larry Flint's magazines, or maybe even Playboy, I don't know, we haven't gone there yet, but it will be referred to as the Smut Chronicles. Thank you.
Absolutely. I love it. I don't believe you that you're just reading Hustler for the articles, but I'll let you have that.
How dare you?
Next up on our recurring segments, we're definitely going to dive into ancient mysteries and archaic conundrums. This is something that has been near and dear to my heart for 2 decades. Ancient mysteries, ancient sites, their relationship to the occult, archaeoastronomy, ley lines, the freaky, spooky woo-woo. I love all of it. I've visited many sites. I love the stone structures and the megaliths. And there's more mystery that comes out each year. More we discover we don't know, as well as things we are discovering. I'm not just talking Stonehenge. We're talking places all over the world. So we'll be deep diving into that for sure. Of course, we have the recurring segment of pop culture symbolism and semiotics. We talk about movie and books all the time. TV shows, their relationship to propaganda or to current political movements or occult movements, occult symbolism. So we'll definitely be diving into that as well. What else we got? The false flagets. These are false flags from all over the world. We've talked quite a bit about. Good, I broke you down. I made you laugh. All these false flags from all over the world. There's not enough we can learn from them. And I've been looking into much of the false flag movements kind of coming out of the Gladio era in Europe. And we don't hear much about those, but they are happening rampantly there and have for decades. And at least in the States, we don't hear as much about it. So I do love looking into the false flag phenomena. Corporations, tomfoolery, and exposés.
There is no shortage of tomfoolery from the corporations that we are dealing with in today's day and time. No shortage at all.
Not at all. And I probably have some insight from my own personal world of working in a Fortune 500 company, working for a big pharma as an analytical chemist. I see some of the stuff that goes on there company wide, not what I'm doing. I'm just a lowly bench laboratory chemist, but I see the communiques going through intercompany wide, and I'm kind of plugged into the big pharma world a bit. And I used to tell people in autonomy that they say, well, Sean, what do you do? I say, well, I work for the devil. I work for a big pharma. I'm a chemist there. And it was one of the other students in our season that said, no. You don't work for the devil. You're an infiltrator. Tell people that you're an infiltrator. You're not working for them. You're an infiltrator. So let's go with that. I'm an infiltrator.
Yeah, and we could get into and we will get into some of the background because, there is a scientist background in your family. So there's a reason that you found yourself there. And there is also some really interesting information that we talked about. And this is not critiquing the process or any business specifically, but it's just talking about the actual factual way a medicine comes to be and the various trials that it is going through, what all of those stages represent, all that kind of stuff. So that is really interesting information that is, in my opinion, good for anybody to have a better understanding of. So we can perhaps get into a little bit of that at some point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless you're under Project Warp Speed, you're not getting a medicine out to the public in a couple month time span. I've been in the industry for 15 plus years. I've had a couple that have made it to market that I've worked on. None of them have made it to market from discovery. That's your first stage of pharmaceuticals, is your discovery. So you're looking at what works in animal models, what molecules are out there, what can you manipulate, what can you synthesize, test it, theorize it. Oh, this looks good. Let's start working on this. So in the 15 years I've been in the industry or longer, I haven't seen any go from discovery to that. It's typically big pharma buying other research and saying, oh, you're at this stage already? Great. That saves us some money. Here's a couple billion. We'll pluck that from you. And then it saved us 7 years. So still with that, I've only seen a couple on the market that I've actually touched and tested, but we can get deep into that in the future because it is a really long and often corrupt process.
Yeah. And people I think that they would benefit from understanding a little bit more of that. So we shall.
All right. Next recurring segment that we love to discuss: crypto, but not the money. Not the money. I'm talking Bigfoot. What you think about Bigfoot?
I don't know much about Bigfoot, Sean, so we're definitely going to have to talk that one out. Although there is a Bigfoot or a Yeti that is talked about in parts of Western North Carolina, and his name is Nobby.
Nobby.
Yes.
That was the name. That's what you called your ex-boyfriend, right? Oh, nailed it. Got it. What mountain range is that?
I don't know. I guess actually this the foothills
Okay.
of Appalachia.
Gotcha.
The AT.
The Appalachian Trail. Can't beat it.
Appalachian Trail.
Appalachian.
Sean.
Sorry. It's my New Jersey accent.
Yes,
You're
it
gonna
is.
have to,
It's very offensive.
You have to put up with it. But there's more than just Bigfoot. Do you know any other cryptozoological creatures, Ashley?
I think so. We've talked about Mothman.
We have talked about Mothman.
That
Absolutely.
counts, right?
Richard Gere himself. Just kidding. But yes, we've talked about Mothman. What else you got?
Okay, so all iteration of Bigfoot. What about aliens like blues and grays? Does that count? Or that's in the UFO territory?
That's more in the UFO territory. Let's stick
Okay.
to the terrestrial.
How about trolls?
Cool. Trolls, leprechauns, fairies, they all fit under that category.
Mermaids?
Sure, absolutely. Mermaids would fit into that. Any other cryptos, not the money you could think of? Don't say Bitcoin. Don't say it.
I think that's honestly that's probably no. I know something. There's something in that's supposed to be kind of scary in Mexico.
The chupacabra.
Chupacabra, yes.
That's true. We got Loch Ness Monster.
We have
We're-
Nessie,
We've got a lot of
the beloved Nessie.
serpent sea creatures.
We got Champ.
I was just going to say Champ. Absolutely.
Yes.
I went to school with some people that swear they saw Champ. And I went to the University of Vermont right on Lake Champlain. And many friends of mine from my school days claim they saw something up there. I never did. I was never so lucky.
Yeah. You can call me Fox Mulder because I want to believe. I have always wanted to believe in Nessie,
I love it.
the gentle giant.
Well, you can call me Scully.
The skeptical scientist.
I'm not so skeptical, but in her character arc in X-Files, she kind of becomes the believer at the end, which was fantastic.
Spoiler alert.
You're right. I just ruined it for the people that haven't seen the X-Files yet. Where have you been?
That's
Where have
something
you
we
been?
can get into. Yes. What is the statute of limitations on the X-Files?
That's true. I think we're past the statute of limitations on
Okay,
the X-Files.
fair. I'll allow it.
All right. Last but not least, the evildoers. I don't have a sound clip for Bush saying the evildoers yet, but I know everybody can hear it in their head. Them evildoers.
Yes, I feel like there's no shortage of material to talk about RE evildoers.
There's some bad hombres out there. Bad hombres. They're everywhere, and we can't get away from them. But we've both read books and done research in recent months on specific key players that could be considered evildoers and their evil doings. So I'd like to do some deep dives with you on some new evildoers for this show, which would be quite awesome.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of people for us to choose from and deep dive. And this is something that, does come up quite a bit is this idea of generational connections. And you see it over and over again. And even recently, I was seeing something. So obviously we know that the Kennedy family dynasty, we know that it goes back for a very long time and that the brothers Kennedy were involved in politics and then their children and their, went on to be in politics as well. And their other like Ted Kennedy siblings, things like that. And now Robert Kennedy's son, I just saw a post about this. Like I would need to verify it, but I read that his son was working for Palantir. So you can see, like, sometimes the connections are very, you know, they're very surface connections, but they go back a very long time. And there are these interlocking, it goes often back to the cryptocracy, like we talked about, these interlocking chain links that make up this entire, I don't know, spider web or whatever you want to refer to it as, that we see of all of these connections.
Thank you. I'm going to have to change this from the evildoers to the evil generations, because you just explained Star Trek: The Next Generation, but for the evildoers, I love it. We'll be that's good, Ashley.
Okay,
I
good.
tip my hat to
So,
you. I like it.
and
Making
I
it up,
tip
making
my
it up as we go.
proverbial hat
Love
to
it.
you as well. Okay, good. So we've covered that's a very good and comprehensive list of all the subjects that we want to get into. It's an ambitious project, but we have time and we are dedicated to the cause. So we're going to start chipping away in our next episode very soon. Now, we, as Sean had said earlier, we are going to have like a little bit of a preview teaser for what we're getting into for our second episode. But in the meantime, we wanted to continue to have this kind of introductory episode and discuss a little bit of our background, how we became interested in these subjects, red pill moments, that kind of thing. And I think that Sean's is a little more interesting than mine because there is some kind of paranormal influence in there. And then he had a really interesting project that he worked on leading up to COVID times. So I want to touch base on that and a little more of his background. And I'll throw in some of my red pill moments as well. But Sean, why don't you talk to us about where you're coming from? Okay, let's talk about some of a little bit of the background, your interest, and some of those red pill moments.
Sure, thank you. And for the record, I think you are just as interesting as me. Your history is just as interesting as mine, so don't sell yourself short, loser. Just kidding. Um, well, my name is Sean. Hi. I was born in Texas. My parents were in graduate school when I was born down there, so I wasn't born where they're from. They're all from the Northeast. After Texas, I was very young. We moved to upstate New York. My mother, pharmacist at this time. My father, a chemist or analytical spectroscopist, technically. And we found our way to New Jersey, which neither of them are from, but we moved to New Jersey, specifically Princeton, New Jersey. And I was 4 or 5 years old. And we lived in an apartment. Siblings weren't born yet. And I can recall every night waking up in my bed and sitting up in bed as a young boy, and I would see a little girl in my apartment, right between my room and my parents' room. And there was a little end table in this hallway, and I could see this little girl standing at the table, almost like she was reading something on the table, kind of looking down, and she would look over at me and then look at my parents' room and look down, and it would just repeat, almost like, stone tape theory. Ashley, I'm
I
not
don't.
talking, not stoned ape. That's Terence McKenna's theory of
Right.
psychedelics and mushrooms jump-starting human consciousness from in our evolution. I don't
Yeah,
believe it anyway.
from a pool of salt water. Yep.
Instead of stoned ape, there's stone, like a rock, tape, like a VHS tape. So I don't know if this fully fits into it, but it kind of does. Think of every location on Earth having its own memory, being sentient.
Yes.
So specifically, high emotive states would leave an imprint on walls or the ether in the filthy basement I'm in. If someone was murdered down here, there may be screams one time a year or every night that the people that live here would hear. And that's not happening in my basement, but just an example. And maybe what I was seeing was part of what was imprinted into the ether in this realm in that apartment. Maybe that's what I was seeing, but maybe I was seeing a pure apparition of a little girl that lived there at some point that would stand at that table reading or whatever the hell she was doing. So long story short, that was kind of a red pill moment for me, but it wasn't an immediate red pill. I was so young and naive. It didn't phase me. It was tell your parents about it. They blow it off. They don't believe you. He's a kid.
Yeah, it was just a normal occurrence.
Yeah, totally. Tell cousins and friends and neighbors. They don't believe me. They just think it's a 4 or 5-year-old talking gibberish. It was years later in Catholic school that I really thought about it. I was like, holy shit. I was seeing a ghost all that time. I wasn't scared. I didn't have any concept of this needs to be fearful. I need to be scared of this. I was just seeing it, and I'd look at it and I would go back to bed. Like it wasn't a I didn't make a big fuss about it. Maybe this is the reason why I became a bedwetter, but I don't know for sure. Maybe I was too scared to get out of bed, but my memory was, see this girl, look at her. I can't believe my parents don't notice her. All right, well, I'm tired. I'm going back to bed.
Yeah.
And I remember it happening all the time. So anyway, that's a early red pill kind of moment for me. As I mentioned, I did go to a Catholic private school. By 10 years old, camping in the backyard with a friend, and we lived next to a graveyard. So we were already a little bit spooked at 10 years old. Oh, you're in the graveyard. Oh, Halloween. It's like Halloween all year round. My father built a treehouse, didn't put a top on it, and we were camping outside in the summer on Nickelodeon's Go Camping Night, whatever the hell day that is. Thank you, Stickley.
Yeah.
And we saw a classic disc-shaped bright white UFO float across the sky, dead silent. Not at my age could I have hit it with a baseball, but a baseball player easily could have hit it with a baseball. It was so close to us and so quiet and so bright, and it just glided over graveyard, church, my backyard, forest into the distance, and we lost it. But we weren't scared of it. It was kind of like seeing a ghost when I was a kid. We weren't running for the hills or like running to mommy and daddy's room, waking them up in the middle of the night. It was just like, whoa, did you see that? Wow, that was cool. We'll have to tell everyone about that in the morning. And we just went on with our lives. But we did talk about it eventually to our parents. And turns out my father was really into UFOs. So he went up to upstate New York where he's from, and brought me his UFO and paranormal magazines and books he had from the 60s and 70s. I probably still have them somewhere, but I have no idea where. But that was kind of a red pill moment for me, because it was, I didn't know anyone else was really interested in this stuff. And it sent me on a whole UFO research path for 20 years of my life. So it was quite significant.
Yeah, for sure. And it was a reaffirming moment, that your parents, that they were supportive of your interest in that. They didn't question that you had seen what you saw. And they in fact provided additional information for you to check into. So kind of supporting your interest there, which I think is really good. The other thing that I was going to say about the little girl, or like items or things, events being kind of imprinted, I used to read this series of fiction books about people with psychic abilities, and their psychic abilities worked in such a way that everybody was kind of different. So they had some sort of a different psychic skill, but being able to see what happened in a room and access the memories of a space was specifically one of the psychic skills in those book series. And as you know, that's something that we talk about quite a bit, is the overlap between things that we see or that are discussed in real life, and then that same thing being a theme or come up in fiction, and kind of like which came first, the chicken or the egg situation. But I always find it interesting to see the overlap there. So anyway,
very fascinating.
Yeah. So after your dad supported, believed what you said about kind of seeing this object and getting you books and magazines that he had, then tell us about after that.
One of the books he took from his father's house to give to me was Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, one of the mid 70s printings. And I read it as like a fourth grader and was so excited for the time we get to cover it in school. I was like, I can't wait. Oh my gosh, we're going to cover like ancient mysteries. Holy shit, we don't know how this stuff was built. Nothing from ancient history makes sense. I can't wait to study this in school. But it never came. So
I was
that was
gonna
kind of
ask.
a
I was
red
gonna
pill moment.
ask if you're still waiting on that.
Still waiting on it. Absolutely still waiting on it. But to no avail. It never came and it will never come. Not in the schools here. So that was kind of a red pill moment for me a few years later. Like, shit, we don't get to learn about this. So I learned that there are things you're not going to learn in school and things that you are only going to discover if you do your own research. So I take that as a personal red pill moment because it led me on the path that got me here today. Moving forward in time, and I'm giving you my whole life history. 9/11 came, and I was 16 years old. A couple of my friends went off to war after graduation, and I'm mentioning that because at the University of Vermont, where I went to college in 2004, 2005, there was a glass blowing expo. It's a big hippie town in Vermont. Glass blowing expo, and all these vendors had booths out on the town square and Church Street. And one of the booths there was from the I forget the other guy's name, but Jason Burmis and the other guy that made Loose Change were there, and they were giving away loose change. You could buy it, or they would give you little segmented clips on DVDs. And I talked to them. I didn't know shit about it. I believed the 9/11 story. I was naive, 18 years old, and I was like, sure, I'll take that back to my dorm. And I watched it in my dorm, and it blew my fucking mind. And it was the segment on the Pentagon. And it was such a red pill moment for me that I called my parents right away to be like, yo, you got to listen to what I got to tell you. I discovered that it doesn't seem like a plane hit the Pentagon. Something doesn't make sense here. And they were like, you're fucking nuts. You're nuts. What are you talking about? Go. Shouldn't you be studying or something? So that was kind of a red pill moment because it sparked the mistrust in the government, and that I'm not being told everything. I wasn't told what I wanted to learn when I was younger. And now the utmost authority in the government definitely ain't telling me the truth. And I'm 18 and I'm finally figuring it out. So big red pill moment for me. Led me down other paths. I eventually found Behold a Pale Horse from William Cooper, and that got me on a whole path. I watched What the Bleep. I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
I I don't think I'm familiar with that one.
All right, I'm not going to take up all the time to cover it, but it's kind of a, we'll say quantum physics, but it's like a spiritual physics movie, documentary, but movie with real researchers in this movie, including Candace Pert. But anyway, I was really interested in the quantum physics and quantum theory in that silly movie. And I was spending so much time at school in the library that I decided to start looking up the authors that were featured in that movie. And I found all their books, and I read all of them, dozens. And I call it a red pill moment because it opened me up to, holy shit, there are more books out there of stuff I want to learn. I'm being told to read this garbage in school, garbage in university. I want to read what I'm ready for. And that is what sparked me building a massive bookshelf and book collection that I have today, because I wanted to read what I wanted to read. There's cool stuff out there. I just got to go find it. Use the Dewey Decimal System at the library. You'll find it. So, did I put you to sleep, Ashley?
No, nope, I'm still with you. And I think that you make a really good point. And this is something that, I talked to you about interesting books reviewed, the channel a lot. And that's the similar thing that he talks about is that it was kind of like once he got started and then he started looking at a subject that he was interested in, and then he found the references in that book, and then he goes and finds those, and on we go. This ripple effect of really getting into a particular subject or down a rabbit hole to try to have a comprehensive understanding of the subject matter. And it is really, you know, it is disappointing in some of like we in the conversations as far as like our education goes. And this is not specifically a knock on public school because you attended a private school. But whatever curriculum we have is whatever it is. And there's so much that we're never exposed to, or that doesn't get talked about. And this is at a college level as well, of course. Whenever I was like my freshman year and you have to take world civilization, right? But you don't, like we were talking about this the other day as far as the Vietnam War. Like there is so much that goes into that. There's so many details that you never get, that you never understand. And if I recall, I don't remember it being associated with even the possibility that that was a factor in the assassination of John F. Kennedy and things like that. So there's just so much that we're not talked about. Of course, it would be impossible for them to cover everything, but that's why it's important to instill the skills of pursuing what you want to learn. And oftentimes, I think we see that lacking in today's day and time. So it's good that you figured it out and we're able to start pursuing and figuring out how to find more information on the subjects that you were interested in.
Thank you. Made me feel so good about that.
I credit your dad giving you those magazines and books after you were interested in something. I think that had to help. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. 'Cause both my parents had their own ghost stories from when they were young. So when I told them my experiences, they didn't like throw me down the well or lock me in a closet. They were like, "Yeah, oh yeah? Really interesting. Okay, well tell us more. Okay. Well, why don't you research it? Why don't you look into it? Do your own research." Theme of the night. So, I'm going to bore people and lose people. So let's move forward. I'm out of college. I start attending my first conferences. I did the whole circuit starting in 2008, UFO conferences, started listening to Coast every night. This is popular in the super soldier era. So I went to super soldier conferences, paranormal conferences, psychedelics conferences, reading books galore, adding more to my collection with the little bit of money you have as a recent graduate without a job that parties too much. I was going to conferences and was on, I met Giorgio Zucalos. You remember who he is? Aliens from the meme, guy with the crazy hair
Oh,
from Ancient
yes. Yes,
Aliens.
of
Everyone
course.
knows him.
Yeah.
Met him at a conference
We
and we
did
hung
talk
out
about
for
that.
hours.
You
Crazy
said that
guy.
he had quite the female following, right?
Yeah, when I first met him, he had no following and nobody went to his talk, and he just dressed like Indiana Jones. And a few years later, after Ancient Aliens came on, I saw him at another conference, and he had his own harem of female followers, large chested, following him everywhere. It was incredible. It's like, man, what a guy! What an idol! Unbelievable. How'd you do this? So
It was just it's the power of memes and the power of a television show.
power of a television show to manipulate the public. I don't even believe most of that shit, but it was still so fascinating. And listening to him and others talk at these conferences was mind blowing to me as a young, naive little ginger in New Jersey.
Yeah, well, we talked about there have been a lot of these people who were influential in the UFO space or the paranormal space. You have met a lot of these people, and some of them you have that they came to your conferences, which we'll get into that a little bit. And it's your take is interesting as well, based on like what were they like in person, how did they treat you, what conversations were they willing to have, and then the sense that you got from them. Like, I felt like this person was a grifter, or I felt like this person was actually really, genuine, at least. Like, maybe they weren't right, but at least they were, I thought that they really believed what they were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there are quite a few grifters in that community, as there are in every community, but especially the alternative community. There's money to be made there, especially on people buying books and posters and material. So there's going to be grifters galore. It just took me a long time to figure out who was what, because when you're young and naive, you just believe everything. It took
Right.
me years to kind of separate the chaff and filter out what was, oh, okay, you're probably just a spook, or you're just a grifter, or you're just taking notes on people privately and selling it to the highest bidder, which has happened, and I'll get into it shortly. So you kind of touched on it. I did run into the New Jersey UFO Congress. They held conferences once or twice a year, and monthly meetings in a meeting room of the public library where I was living in New Jersey. Became friends with them, showed up to all their monthly meetings. 110% boomers there. I was the youngest, and I'm like 24, trying to keep up with all these people that knew so much. So it was a crash course for several years, learning everything I could, absorbing everything, slowly understanding, okay, I don't need to believe that. Okay, that's bullshit. Okay, yeah, you don't need to tell me my past life, I was a Starship Trooper. Okay, I don't need to believe that, but I love the story. Sure, thank you.
Yeah,
And
so you're honing your discernment during this time,
true.
and while you're doing that, you are attending a lot of events and continuing your education, which
Yeah,
is
as a youngin, which was
yeah.
not tough, not easy being around the experienced older crowd when I was so young. But I loved it and I admired it, because this is before the podcast era. Um, there was no being anonymous online and just listening to stuff and staying silent, and nobody ever knows. These people had to show up in public, meet every month. People would make fun of them and they didn't give a shit. They showed up and they talked about themselves being abducted by aliens. Likely not true, but they still showed up, and I gave them a lot of credit for them. So they built up a lot of confidence in me, so much so that I started to give my own presentations. I would read a book or do research and say, hey, I'd like to present something this month, and I would give a PowerPoint presentation. And it got so popular that people kept requesting me show up again and do more and more and more, and it was an absolute blast.
Yeah, and, that has been pretty foundational to where you're at today, as far as not only the presentation skills, but the people that you networked and interacted with, and what they were able to teach you. And, like we're talking about, as far as if people feel like they were abducted, then that's a whole other conversation of whether you believe them or not. And then something that we have touched on a little bit in our conversations is about the potential for my labs or the
Mhm.
military abductions. Causing people to believe that they had been abducted by aliens, or whatever. So anyway, it's interesting subject matter, and I think you make a good point about people that are willing to have some skin in the game, to actually show up and vocalize, show their face, and talk about their experiences. And it probably wasn't pleasant for them to experience what they experienced. It was probably pretty bad for some of them if they actually went through something. So there's an element of bravery there, but I think this was really foundational for you to kind of sharpen your teeth, or sharpen your sword rather,
Yeah.
as far as presentations and networking and things like that.
Yeah, the New Jersey UFO Congress had been going on since like the mid 80s. So it was 30 years into it by the time I got involved with them. And from the stories I heard from them, there was like a wave of abductions, according to them, in like the late 80s, early 90s, where their meeting rooms, sometimes 20 people, sometimes 70 people would show up per month in person to talk for a couple hours, listen to presentations. And during this abduction wave, as they called it, it was like 1 to 200 people showing up, all claiming that they had alien experiences or been abducted. I don't know if that was high time for my labs or manipulation or some kind of electromagnetic experimentation by the powers that shouldn't be that were manipulating people, or high time for repressed memories because they're all being sexually abused at the same time. I don't have the answer, but it always stuck out in my mind when they would say, "Yeah, you should have been here, Sean." Early 89 to 91 was like hot topic. Everybody had alien stories, and some of them were still around and telling me about their alien hybrid babies taken out of their wombs, over and over again. I don't necessarily believe all of them, but I'm sure they went through something. There's going to be some grifters in the mix that just are trying to make friends. There's a phrase we used to say that was these types of events are filled with granola, fruits, nuts, and flakes. Uh, some people show up once and never again. Some people had the craziest stories. You know that they are a nutrageous Reese's nut bar. And others believe everything you tell them, but don't have their own stories. There's a whole gambit of people that would show
Right.
up, is what I was trying to say. And especially when you're deep into these topics, and it's something we'll get into with the trickster. You look deep enough into this stuff, sometimes it starts to look back at you, and it can affect you, and it can, even an entity may attach to you, or an energy may attach to you when you're looking into something that's so deep and dark for so long. You have to be careful and protect yourself, or you're subject to manipulation, which I definitely saw again and again with these people. I'm lucky I didn't fall into it myself.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. And while this is kind of tangentially related, but some of the conversations that we have had are about some of the child abuse or child trafficking conversations. And I think that that is one subject that lately I have been interested in having a philosophical discussion about that, because it's like, what is the right approach here? You know, you want to be educated on a lot of different topics. This is obviously something really important and really bad that happens a lot. So, but then the question is like, how much should we expose ourselves to that content, because it's very disturbing? And then the other part is like, are we, energetically, if we talk about that, are we affecting other people? Are we helping the cause, or are we harming the cause? And I think that while it's not exactly the same that you're talking about, it is dealing with like how these dark subjects can stare back at you, as you
Mhm.
said. And so I do think that maybe we don't have the answer, but that it is worth that philosophical discussion to see like what conversations or what information we can look into and discuss while still protecting ourselves and trying not to do harm to the cause for the victims.
Right. Well said. Well said. We don't want to be a fruit, a nut, or a flake in the
Yeah.
granola bowl.
Yeah, and we don't want to cause harm to people who have experienced great harm.
You're right.
And sometimes like I think it's possible to do that unintentionally. So, anyway, that's something that maybe we will contend with more as we go through the show and talk about different things. But all that aside, so talk to us a little bit about, you spend a lot of time attending this UFO Congress. And I know that it ended up sort of transitioning into another name, and you ended up, taking over as far as like the I don't know, what do you call it, the president, the figurehead? Talk to us about that.
It
And
was
then
director. How dare you?
director, excuse
Yeah,
me.
the guy that had been running it for 30 years passed the baton to someone else, and he ran it for a couple years, and then it was offered to me, and I took over. So I was like 28 years old running a conspiracy study group, basically, that had been around for 30 years. So it was a bit daunting. It was quite the endeavor. But I said, sure, I'm going to do this. I'm changing the name. It's going to be Fringe New Jersey, because I don't want to be associated with just UFOs. There's many other topics that are sparking interest, and most of our conversations at that point were in the realm of other topics. So I said, all right, great. I love it. Let's go to let's expand this. We'll go to ancient mysteries. We'll do psychedelics. We'll do quantum physics, and we did spontaneous human combustion stories and classic conspiracy stories, and deep dives into JFK and RFK assassinations, deep state movements and geopolitics. We just expanded the topics. I hosted several conferences that I think went very well, and monthly meetings that went on great for several years. And by the time COVID came, we had been expelled from our library base of 30 years, because there was an argument that caused some ruckus about Planned Parenthood and their potential selling of fetal tissue for profit. And the library was not happy that that was our they're okay with it as aliens and people saying that their alien babies are being extracted from them, but you can't question Planned Parenthood. So we had
Wow.
I don't think I ever told you that. So we had to leave location. We went somewhere else, lasted for a couple months, went somewhere else. And then COVID came and there was no more meeting in person. And we all became anonymous on the internet for good.
It's really sad.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, it is sad to have this, like, this is part of the stuff that we talk about with COVID. Like, that was why, or the pandemic, that was why it was so devastating, is because people did things in real life, and then that changed. And I also find it weird that the library was not okay, like, uh, with having the conversation. I mean, this was peak cancel culture, though. So I guess I'm not very surprised, but I just feel like people should be allowed to have a conversation. Just because a conversation takes place within your walls, within a conference room, does not mean that that's where you stand. Like, what happened to just like agree to disagree, or we're not responsible for the views expressed in meetings here? I don't know. It just seems silly.
It absolutely is silly. I think they were a little bit, I think it was too taboo, too real of a topic. Like, oh shoot, this one kind of hits close to home, rather than the spooky woo woo. They're talking about aliens. Ooh, bada bing. When we talked about the facility down the road from where we were potentially selling fetal tissue, because it was in the news that some of them had been busted for it, then there was a bridge too far. So unfortunate, but it was great while it lasted. I met so many him authors and spoke to so many publishers and marketers for these authors that it showed me a lot, and I was able to learn how to pick out a lot of the grifters and the spooks. And there were definitely people taking tabs on these meetings, as CIA or any other three-letter agency would do. They don't just want to keep tabs on the good people working their 9-to-5 jobs. They want to know what the counterculture is doing, and we were part of the counterculture. They want to know what the punk scene is doing. They want to know what the goth scene is doing. They want to know what the UFO researchers are up to. They want to be able to grab, manipulate, and control and track, trace, database each and every aspect of life. It could be white power meetings. They want to get in there because they want to know what's being said and how can they use it to their benefit in the future. And we were definitely subject to that because I met many that and called them out, called people out that never showed up again after saying, hey, we'll get into it. It's long conversations. Well, ask me that when we're not deep into the night about how some of the spooks I picked out that never showed up again and apologized.
Yeah, we will do that. We will definitely get into that and do a little bit more digging. So, um, what else? Yeah, you're right. It is deep into the night, and we are just over that hour time frame. I know we still have a little bit more to cover, but I want to, and we can always go back and continue this conversation later. So let's hit a few more highlights about as far as your more red pill moments and kind of getting you to the point that you're at now.
Oh, once Fringe, New Jersey fizzled out, we did do Zoom calls for a couple months, but it wasn't always working, and we had been hacked a couple times by people just like popping porn up on the screen. And eventually, I said, I can't keep doing this. It was right at the time that I was like getting married, buying a house, having children. So I had to say goodbye to it and find something else. So this was COVID time. I was buying hundreds of books, reading like a book every 5 days. It was a gnarly time, but it brought me on my path to meeting you because eventually I needed something else. So I joined Autonomy. There were numerous red pill moments in reading many of these books and articles over the years. In the last 6 years, pardon me, but too many to name that weren't as they're not as impactful as when you're like 12 years old and you're like, oh my God, everyone in authority is lying to me. But and now I have a 2-year-old son who sees something in my basement. I don't know. I'm assuming it's the family member that passed away that owned the house before us, but he sees and says hello to something in my basement daily.
Yeah, we've talked about that. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about we've talked a little bit about your career and what what you do. We can get more detailed um later, especially when we talk about some of the what we brought up earlier as far as like the process of getting a drug on the market, all these kinds of things that are good for people to understand. But as far as your regular home life, talk to us a little bit about that as far as juggling, your work and your family and home and all that good stuff.
Oh man, deep question. Think, change, repeat. um, I'm living a double life. I myself am a spook. No, I'm. Sometimes I think I am living a dual life because I have to put on this face of analytical chemistry when I go to work, and I'm part of the system, and I'm a cog in the system that I don't really want to be a part in of for my entire life, my entire career. For now, I like what I'm doing. It's just it happens to be in an industry that is littered with corruption. I've never seen it amongst me and my peers at work, but I know what I think more of the clinical trials aspect and the C-suite, as they call it, the chief suite of pharma companies are just a revolving door between each other and backdoor payouts and stuff, including with the FDA. So anyway, having to put on a face at work is difficult, but I have fantastic people I do work with, and there's people I talk with at my job that I talk with the same way I do to you. that where you're kind of equal, you're on the same plane, you've got the same background. I don't need to be like, oh, let me explain this first before we talk about it. They're kind of on our level, which is really nice. So there's more of us out there, people. Find the others.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I do think that's good, and we've had those conversations, and it sounds like that you do have a good working situation. And as far as, I don't know, it's like the purity test, right? Like, how pure do we need to be to not be contributing to what we see today, right? Like, we pay taxes, we're paying to the Borg, we use our cell phones, we're using DARPA internet, we like there are limitations with just existing in this system at this time, right? So I don't get too critical about that, and we've talked quite a bit about it, but I think that eventually you may want to get out of that. But in the meantime, there have been a lot of good opportunities that you've had to educate people, to get children interested in science. And also, you work with a really diverse group of people. So you're constantly, trying to learn about their culture, their traditions, asking them what they think about this particular subject. So, I think you're doing what you can, and overall there's a lot of benefit there.
Very true. I am the minority there in my job. So I don't just take it as a, oh, let's just work together. I try to really learn about their background. And when I'm reading my free spooky woo-woo books or my like espionage books at work, I'm asking the people from those countries where the events took place, like, what do you know about this? What's the background? Oh, mercenaries in the Vietnam War that we were just talking about. Korean mercenaries that are not very well talked about at all. I ask women that I work with that are originally from North Korea because I want to know the backstory of how the hell does no one know we hired mercenaries for the Vietnam War from Korea, from the Republic of Korea in the 50s and 60s? Why is this not talked about? And I got their perspective. Same thing with some of the other books that I've read about ancient archaeoastronomy related structures in India, and I asked the people from Gujarati, India, or Gujarat, what they think about it. Have they been there? How did it make you feel? What did you see? What have you learned growing up? What has changed in your life? So, even though I'm an infiltrator for Big Pharma, I still get a lot of great information from the people I work with. They're fantastic people.
Yeah. So I think overall a net positive, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we continue to make episodes. Now, this is something that we talked about. I have a little bit more of a concise, sort of like my red pill moments, only because mine were not, well, first of all, they were not supernatural in nature. I did, okay. I don't know if that's even the right way to say it, because I feel like I have been open-minded about this stuff as far as paranormal my whole life. I think I was probably a little bit interested and a little bit open to that. I remember as a kid, there was this supposedly haunted church in the area that I grew up in, and I begged my grandmother to take me to this church because I really wanted to see it, and she did. And
Abandoned church or current,
it,
like
it
in use at the time?
it was not abandoned. So what it was that this particular church was the original structure. And then they owned a pretty big piece of property. And so across the street, they had built like a newer, modern, beautiful
Got it.
brick church. But this was like the old classic wooden. I'll have to get you some information on that because you'll probably find it interesting. But I remember hearing about that. So I always was kind of open and interested in that kind of thing when I was growing up, but I think that I had this sort of separate, like, that's on one part of my ideology and or in my sphere, and then the other part is like the material world. So I grew up in this very um from the South. I'm from the South in back in the day. So it
Oh,
was
bless your heart.
bless your little pea picking heart. So it was largely a conservative area. And that's what I came from. So I became interested in politics at a young age, and I'll tell you why. And I have wondered about this in years past. Was was there some sort of like Department of Ed funding that went to public schools for them to have like mock elections? I'm not sure about that, but when I was in the 5th grade, we had a mock election. And I know I'm dating myself here when I talk about this, but this was leading up to the election between George Bush, Bill Clinton, and Ross Perot. And they even had like the local television station come in, talk to us students like how we were going to vote. And of course, I was never going to vote for Bill Clinton. And I was originally going independent with Ross Perot, but I changed my vote at the last minute. So all that
Right,
to
to who?
say,
You voted
George
for
Bush,
who?
obviously,
No.
I was a conservative.
Not only once, but twice.
Twice. So so it was impactful to me. I became interested in the election process after that. And I remember she even wanted us, like, you could get extra credit if you brought in a political cartoon
Wow.
a couple times a week. And this was also where we had a man, I don't know. It's sounding like social credit score the more like when I'm getting ready to tell you this. But we had a program. So like every week, if you had, let's say, perfect behavior, your homework was done, all that stuff, you stayed out of trouble, then you got a paycheck. And then we had this like little school store, and you could buy fake cars with your paycheck. And so I had 2 cars. Honda Civic was one of them. And you had to kind of balance your checkbook. And we had these little check balance, or what are they, registers or something that we got from the bank where we could keep track of our purchases. And then if you used improper grammar, so I said ain't a lot. I had a really heavy Southern accent. I'm not sure where I lost it along the way. You may still think that I have one, but trust me, this was much, much more. And I said ain't a lot. So whenever I said ain't, I got money deducted out of my paycheck in the 5th grade. So this was like kind of a comprehensive little trying to teach life skills, I guess. But that was originally how I kind of became interested in politics. And then I was very much a normie. I tried to be, as my handle suggests, think, change, repeat. I was kind of open-minded about some things, and I wanted to learn more. So I would think about these issues, and I looked at them through a lens of like these societal issues that just, oh, I guess they just can't get solved. And because I didn't understand, some of the like libertarian principles or anarchy or agorism or anything like that. And I'm not here to say that any of that's perfect at all. I'm just saying I was living in the two-party paradigm. And I always felt like fiscally conservative. And then as I got older, I would consider myself socially liberal. And I thought, well, there are people that need help. So why can't the government help them? Or why shouldn't they? Or like, what about common sense gun control? Things like that. So it was like thoughtful for a normie is what I would say. And interested in having these conversations, but I hadn't been introduced to kind of like these alternative takes on that. So, then over the years, I was always a big fan of documentaries and stuff like that. And I was introduced to the Milgram experiment. I watched a documentary on that. And I was reflecting on, would I shock somebody just based on what somebody in a lab coat with a clipboard was telling me to do? Would I do that? And of course, I was like, I hope I wouldn't. So that started making me think like, what does authority mean in our day-to-day life? How does that authority or someone just telling you that this is what it is. Like, what does that mean for us? And how much are we going to allow them to have that authority to tell us? So that was something that was a paradigm shift for me. I mean, I've had many, many paradigm shifts over the years, and then I watched The Business of Being Born. This was another paradigm shift because this was talking about the Ricky Lake documentary, but and they're coming at it from more of I'm going to say like a progressive leftist bent, in that women need to be able to have choices and autonomy when they are going through the birthing process, which I don't disagree with that. But I'm looking at it more from what I consider to be a broken or very flawed medical system. So we are not coming at that from the same thing at this point. But back then I didn't really know. I just watched it, and they talked about the rise of cesarean sections that were done in today's day and time. They talked about the increased use in Pitocin in order to induce labor, that there was the potential that doctors were doing these things. They were scheduling sections in order to accommodate like a better schedule for themselves, as opposed to what was actually best for the woman and her unborn child. And so it was just a really interesting conversation, and like people having choices as far as if you wanted to have a home birth, and states that make that very difficult. So that was another paradigm shift for me, because it brought into, well, what else doesn't make sense about what we are traditionally told in a medical setting? Because as you know, you've gone through this with your family now, having 2 children, that there are a lot of hoops to jump through. Even if you try to go through a little bit more of an alternative, or a more natural friendly birthing process, that there are a lot of regulations, there's a lot of pressure, and there isn't a lot of informed consent that is provided for the mother or for the parents of the baby. So that was a big, something that was sort of foundational, because when I started thinking about these issues in the medical system, I was not just applying it to the birthing process. I then began to apply those same questions to everything else. Like, whatever is considered the standard of health care, that was a big question for me. And then of course it became exponentially more complicated and concerning after the pandemic. And I'm not going to get into that, but I'm just saying, like, that was a very foundational time. Now, I was already what I would consider myself to be awake or questioning a lot of what we're seeing by then, but that was absolutely a foundational moment to experience and to see a lot of what we hear about in real time. That was incredible. So then there was I feel like there was another couple of things that were, it was, being exposed to the Free Thought Project and some of the memes that they would make, just asking basic questions about 9/11. And I also happened to go to this, tattoo artist at one time, some major voluntarist and anarchist, and he would talk about all of these things that sounded crazy to me. I was like, "This guy is really out there." But eventually I was following him on social media, and then he would share posts from the Free Thought Project. I started following Free Thought Project, and then from there I found other creators. So I found Sal Mayweather, who is a big proponent of the agorist movement, and like Samuel L. Konkin, and these other people that were, even if they don't work together and collaborate, they're in the space of parallel systems, agorism, anarchism, community building, all of that. And that led me down my path, where I found autonomy and Richard Grove, and then where we met in our season, and we were the first person and that we had a conversation with.
Wow.
So it's a long and winding road.
Wow, very cool. Ricky Lake,
Yes.
right? She woke
Yeah.
you up. Unbelievable. How
It
many
is
people's
unbelievable.
lives have changed because of Ricky Lake? You are one of them.
I actually I think that's a really good question. And I think of
I'm
her
making a joke
fondly.
of it, but I'm being
Yeah,
serious. It's incredible.
it is
It really
because
is.
we think of Ricky Lake like when obviously she was in Hairspray. That was very famous. However, I was not aware of that. I had never seen it, didn't watch it. But when I was growing up, I had it was like summers off from school and I'm at home during the summer just chilling, watching my soap operas or watching daytime television. So that's how I knew Ricky Lake.
Yeah.
And then many
The
years later,
original pantsuit, Ricky Lake.
the OG, yeah. And then this documentary comes out and I am interested in all that stuff. And I agree. Like, who would have thought? Who would have thought? But like I said, it's interesting because of the way that they were questioning the narrative was more in this progressive limitation or this progressive kind of system, or let me say that again, progressive point of view of the limitation on women's choices,
Hmm.
whereas mine began it changed me in a different way of thinking, like, this is considered standard wisdom. This is considered just what you do. And why are we listening to these people? And pairing that with what, I had learned from the Milgram experiment, and I was like, this is insanity. So it is actually quite weird that Ricky Lake was that impactful to where I'm at now.
It's
Who would have
amazing.
thought? Yeah,
Yeah, who would have thought? Now, do you think if I showed up wherever you are in my lab coat and lab glasses, you would obey my authority?
definitely not.
Good.
100% no.
Good.
I don't obey your authority.
I know. I know. You're above me.
We're equals, Sean.
True. We're
Some animals are
we're
more
equal.
equal than others, but I won't get
Very
into
true. Ah,
that.
well said. Well said.
All right. So we know there's still a lot for us to discuss as far as like these instances. And I think I've told you this before, but I do have a really strange Ouija board story. We can get into that another time. I
Awesome.
don't know
I love it.
that was an awakening moment. It was a moment that scared the hell out of me. And I vowed to, and I didn't touch it to begin with. This is a story that happened to somebody else that I was friends with, but never I vowed never to touch a Ouija board ever after this. So,
I
we can
second that.
definitely
I definitely wouldn't touch one. I ain't play. I did it when I was a kid. Never again.
yeah, so we can get
Never
to
again.
that too. And you have a little bit of that. So you were raised in a Catholic environment, but you also have some residual Orthodox Christian background as well. And I think that we both kind of align on like what you were talking about. If you stare too long, it stares back, and like what are we opening ourselves up to? And I do find that that is in many ways an overlap with sort of this Orthodox Christianity perspective, that you really need to guard yourself from the
Absolutely. Yeah.
these potential nefarious spirits, demons, whatever.
For sure. You could take it as the devil, or you can take it as a demon, or you can take it as the trickster, or just low level spirits that I'm sure are out there. And religious context or not, they're looking for something to feed on. And when your guard is down, or when you are hanging around the counterculture, you're often very susceptible to these types of things. And we've seen that in some recent ufologist suicides that you and I have talked about, that they're playing a dangerous game being so involved in that realm of conversation, in that realm of the counterculture, that they do make themselves susceptible to the other that's out there. So they've got to be careful, and many have paid the price. And we actually will be talking about several famous people in history that did pay the price for dealing with the dark arts.
Yes. And I think that is a really important theme to touch on, and it is woven throughout so much of the stuff that we discuss is, what happens when you dance with the devil.
Yep. You often meet an untimely end, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, okay. We've covered a lot of really interesting stuff. I have really enjoyed the conversation. We are going to keep it, not too much longer. So before we go, what I would like to do is talk about a little bit of, do a little bit of a teaser for episode 2. Let's talk about what we're going to get into, topics we're going to cover. And the other thing that we have discussed is that because some of this stuff is very dense information, there's a lot of information to cover in the books, that we may end up having to do a series on, like we're going to do these continuous series and topics under our segments that we talked about. But when we're covering several books in a related way, then that may also lend itself to a multi-part series. So anyway, let's talk about what we're going to be covering for our next episode.
Cool. Well, before we get into the big trifecta, there's something I just finished recently and I'm dying to get into it. And maybe we'll do it for episode 2 about human sacrifice in history and today by Nigel Davies. It's a 40-year-old book now, I think, 40-year-old book. Kind of a tour through the planet we call Earth, all of the ancient cultures and their relationship to human sacrifice and how normal it was in ancient times up until this book covers up until mid 20th century, and then it stops. Is it still going on? No doubt about it. Somewhere, probably in secret elite Bilderberg meetings, they're sacrificing children, drinking the blood, human sacrifice. But there were other countries and cultures that were doing it, and cultures you wouldn't expect. You wouldn't expect the beautiful islands of Hawaii to be sacrificing women and children to the water god. But they were doing that up until Captain Cook. Well, then they killed and ate part of Captain Cook, but we'll get into that when we go over this book. We'll go over that. There's a lot of fascinating stories from Africa, from the Middle East, from the Far East, from Asia, to the samurai of Japan, and back to the Americas and then the Native Americans. And it will likely blow your mind. And a lot of these themes, from the Celts to the Hindus to the Cherokee, there's a lot of similar themes that passed through these cultures where they were all sacrificing kind of in the same way or for the same reason. And I can't wait to unload that information on you, Ashley. It's going to be a blast. We're going to take a tour of Earth.
I can't wait. We have already talked a little bit about this, but I definitely want to get into the deep dive of it. And of course, continue our discussion on exactly what you said, that there are themes that are associated with this idea. And then, of course, there are so many questions that are related to the subject, as far as, like you said, are they still doing it? I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that it is still happening at least somewhere. And I think that our tendency may be to say, like, oh, it's just like whatever primitive culture still exists. But and I'm not making a claim. I'm just saying that perhaps it isn't just primitive cultures that are still practicing that. And again, this is pure speculation on my part, but when we talk about the predator class and some people speculate what religion they could possibly be practicing. Is it Frankism? Some people say that's associated with maybe David Icke, maybe he's the one that brought that to the fold. Or is it, are they Babylonians, or are they Canaanites, or whatever that looks like? And again, I'm not saying I have an answer. I'm just saying that if there is a connection to be made to the behavior of the predator class and a religion that they could be practicing, then I find it to be very interesting that the idea of child sacrifice and the the human trafficking conversation that we've talked about many times is still occurring in this day and time. So even if it isn't, is that something that is thematically important to today's day and time? We already had the conversation that this is a tumultuous, point in history that is, we're experiencing a lot of change, cultural change, values. It's just, what do they call this? The fourth turning, basically. And I think that we feel that. So is it thematically important that we're seeing those themes pop up at this time? And I would say that perhaps. I think it's at least worth a discussion.
I concur. Thank you, Mrs. Frazzledrip.
Ah. How dare you? So, okay, well, I think that we are at a good stopping point for today, a good intro and what we have in store for our next shows coming up. And I'm really excited to get into this project. So I just want to let people know that if you want to reach out to us, we're still kind of figuring out, we don't really have a social media presence as the Fool Me Twice podcast. You can always find me over on Twitter, think_change_2. You can email me personally at thinkchangerepeat@gmail. And you can also contact Sean and myself at our Fool Me Twice Gmail, which is thefoolmetwicepodcast@gmail.com. So feel free to reach out, touch base with us there. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and hit that notification bell so you'll be alerted when new content is coming out. Having said that, I appreciate everyone tuning in with us, and I want to hand it off to Sean for last thoughts and words before we get out of here.
Thank you for setting this up, Ashley. It's greatly appreciated. I appreciate anyone that took the time to listen to me rant and ramble over the last hour and a half. There won't be the incoherent rambling during the next episodes. We're going to be deep diving into some really cool stuff. I'm excited. Some of the stuff we've already talked about, but we're going even deeper. Some of it's brand new. Some of it's surprises you have, and some of it's surprises I have. So I'm ready to blow your minds. That's pretty much all I got to say. I'm excited for this. I'm terrified. I'm so terrified and nervous because I want my presentation of material to go good, but I've done this before and I've got a good support system with Ashley. So I am excited for it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. And I'm looking forward to seeing where this project takes us. And I know that as we continue to work together, we're going to, figure out our flow. We're going to figure out our segments, all that good stuff. So I think it's going to be great. And having said that, as Sean said, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our show today. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care, everybody.
Good night.